Welcome, and thanks for joining us for another deep dive. As we settle into 2025, it's already pretty clear this year is shaping up to be one of, well, profound change across almost every sector. So our mission today is really to help you cut through all the noise. We gathered a whole stack of sources, everything from, viral social media bits and detailed legal analyses, right up to government updates. And we're going to try and pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge and insight from all of that. We really want you to walk away feeling, truly well informed about what's shifting right now legislatively, legally, economically, socially. Today, we're focusing on three big areas. First up, the evolving landscape of healthcare and social programs. Then second, the rapid advancements and, importantly, the regulations in tech and AI. And finally, we'll look at the increasingly complex world of global governance, justice, and corporate accountability. Okay, let's dig into this. Let's start with healthcare. It's an area seeing some of the most significant changes we expect in 2025. A lot of this seems driven by these big legislative efforts.
Some sources are even calling one the Big Beautiful Bill, which kind of hints at just how wide-ranging its impact might be.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is just how broadly these proposed changes could reshape things. I mean, everything from individual patient care all the way up to how big hospitals and even nursing homes operate. It's genuinely a systemic shift being discussed.
And a huge part of that, like you said, is this 2025 reconciliation bill.
Right.
So what are the actual key implications?
Yeah.
From the versions that have passed the Senate and the House,
Yeah.
how's it really going to impact people?
Well, okay, the Senate passed its version, right?
Yeah.
And that's said to impact Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP benefits, other areas too. The House passed version, though, it specifically includes cuts to Medicaid and also the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP. In fact, one source we saw projected a potential, get this, $1 trillion cut to Medicaid. That could affect over 17 million Americans. It's a staggering number.
Yeah.
And for many people, yeah, it effectively means, as the source put it, gutting the safety net. So the question becomes, who gets affected? I mean, some viewpoints suggest these cuts are aimed at, quote, illegals and fraud. But the broader concern, really, is that these changes could impact almost anyone who gets sick or becomes disabled or even just loses their employer health coverage. It's sort of a fundamental rethink of who society thinks is eligible for support, potentially pushing millions into, well, a much more precarious healthcare situation. And something else we saw, it reports that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, has apparently been granted access to Medicaid data for tracking purposes.
Okay. And are there also new eligibility requirements being talked about in these proposals?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are proposed Medicaid work requirements. They'd mandate something like 20 hours per week of work or job searching, schooling, maybe volunteering for able-bodied individuals. But it's also really worth remembering because this is a budget reconciliation bill. That special kind of legislation that only needs a simple majority to pass the Senate is still looking to rewrite parts of it.
Oh, okay.
That could mean further adjustments, for families, for kids, for food assistance programs. It's not totally finalized just yet.
Right. Okay. So beyond Medicaid and the reconciliation bill, what specific changes are we seeing for Medicare itself?
For Medicare, costs are projected to go up in 2025. We're talking higher premiums, higher deductibles, and something that's causing, well, significant concern among doctors and providers. It's a pretty substantial 2.8% rate cut for physicians in the 2025 Medicare physician fee schedule. Now, for patients, that could mean fewer doctors willing to accept Medicare, which, might make it harder to get timely care. And just on a more practical level, the Medicare Part D prescription drug plans, they're live now for 2025. So it's probably a good time to remember the key differences between the plan types.
Yeah.
Medicare Advantage plans, they're guaranteed year to year. But Medicare Supplement plans, those are guaranteed for life, though. Importantly, their prices can change. Understanding that difference is pretty crucial when people are making their choices.
So taking a step back, what do all these changes suggest for the long-term future of Medicare and Social Security?
Well, to put it in context, the 2025 Social Security and Medicare Trust Fund report, it paints a pretty stark picture. It projects that benefits could start being reduced in just 8 years.
8 years. Wow.
Yeah. So this looming challenge, it's driving new legislative efforts. There's a bill recently introduced in Congress, for instance, that aims to fully fund Social Security and Medicare, quote, forever, by making wealthier Americans pay more. So lifting the tax cap, closing loopholes, adding a small Medicare tax on high incomes. It's a pretty significant proposal trying to shore up these really vital programs.
And we're also seeing some pretty unique shifts happening at the state level, aren't we? And even outside the U.S. What's catching your eye there?
It's definitely a mixed bag, state by state, country by country. Like in Tennessee, you've got the 2025 Medical Ethics Defense Act. That allows healthcare providers to actually refuse treatment based on their ethical, moral, or religious belief. There's an unconfirmed story going around about an unmarried woman being denied prenatal care because of this new law. And legal experts are kind of warning this could be the first of many similar cases. It definitely raises questions about access. Then you look internationally, like the Philippines. President Bongbong Marcos announced a zero billing policy for basic services and accommodation in Department of Health hospitals for 2025.
Zero billing.
Yeah, essentially free access for patients for those services. That's a pretty bold move towards universal access. Then back in the U.S., you've got Kansas Governor Laura Kelly pushing hard for Medicaid expansion in 2025. She's emphasizing collaboration to get more affordable health care.
Okay.
But then conversely, in Minnesota, UCare, a health insurer, is actually pulling out of Medicaid in 11 counties. That starts September 1st, 2025.
Why are they doing that?
They say it's due to rising costs and not getting reimbursed enough, and it's projected to affect about 88,000 Minnesotans. So that's creating pretty significant disruption there. And then there are more targeted changes too, like TRICARE, for military families and retirees. That's undergoing specific adjustments in 2025. And Arizona has a new bill, House Bill 2764, setting quality standards for dementia care.
Oh, that's important.
Yeah, and it aims to crack down on unsafe facilities. Implementation starts this year, so definitely a crucial step for vulnerable groups.
Medical debt.
Mm-hmm.
And just confusing bills. Those are such constant worries for so many families. Are there any big changes happening there for 2025?
Okay, yeah, this is where it gets genuinely nuanced because the sources we looked at actually offer conflicting information on this one.
Oh.
Yeah, one source suggests medical debt is, quote, back on credit reports, but then another one states a new law means it can no longer be reported. So that's murky.
Right.
What is clear, though, is that the 2025 budget bill is set to introduce reforms to medical billing practices.
Okay, so what kind of reforms?
Well, they're designed to push for greater price transparency, mandating clearer, itemized bills that are actually patient-friendly. There'll be tighter timelines for claims processing, stricter rules for denying responses, and also stronger compliance oversight, aiming to reduce fraud and errors. The goal really is to move towards more patient-centric billing, simpler language, maybe upfront cost estimates.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and patient advocates are also reportedly stepping up efforts to flag and report billing problems. So while the credit report thing is unclear, the move towards clearer billing is definitely a positive step for consumers.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Moving from our physical health to our digital landscape, 2025 is definitely shaping up to be a transformative year for tech, especially with AI evolving so fast and all the increasing scrutiny on data.
Yeah, and if you zoom out a bit, the sheer speed of tech advancement means regulatory bodies are just racing to set up frameworks to govern these new frontiers.
Right.
And this creates, incredible opportunities for innovation, sure, but also completely new challenges for businesses and for individuals, too.
So let's talk AI specifically. What's the main buzz around its impact this year? How are we seeing it actually play out?
Well, AI is increasingly seen less as just a tool and more as a powerful collaborative partner. It's genuinely enhancing creativity, workflow efficiency right across industries. It's not just niche anymore. I mean, a surprising stat, 69% of marketers apparently view AI as revolutionary for job creation, not just replacement.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah, and we're also seeing these generative AI tools like Instagram's Movie Gen, allowing for scalable, high-quality content creation. Adoption is rocketing, even in really heavily regulated sectors like healthcare and finance, which of course naturally leads to the question, how are governments and legal systems actually responding to this explosion of AI capabilities? Well, regulatory bodies like the UK's Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, and Italy's Data Protection Authority, they're actively investigating companies, big names like Snap and OpenAI, looking into data protection practices in AI development. So there's intense scrutiny to make sure AI is developed responsibly. And then there's the EU AI Act. That's the big one.
Right, I've heard about that.
Yeah, with its really stringent risk-based requirements, especially for high-risk applications, it's set to be fully effective in 2025. The aim is really to drive more global alignment in how AI is regulated, and the UK is also hinting at new binding regulation, specifically for the most powerful AI models. We expect that sometime this year. So yeah, it's definitely a race to get ahead of the curve.
And what about the data itself, especially around privacy and, potential lawsuits?
Data protection is still a massive focus. The EU-US Data Privacy Framework, the DPF, that's provided a renewed way for data to flow across the Atlantic.
Explain that a bit more, the DPF.
Sure. It basically acts as the legal bridge, allowing companies to transfer personal data between Europe and the US, which is vital for, everything from online shopping to cloud services.
Got it.
Now, while it's brought some stability, people are still watching closely to see if it holds up long term. We've already seen huge penalties for past data transfer issues, like Uber getting fined $290 million by the Dutch Data Protection Authority for inadequate safeguards. And using data in high-risk ways, think ad tech, real-time bidding, age-appropriate design for kids online, social media that's going to continue to be a top priority for regulators throughout 2025. They're really tightening the screws there.
So for individuals or companies thinking about legal action, what does all this mean for, say, data-related class actions?
Well, data-related class actions are definitely a steady trend across Europe. Legal firms are actively pursuing these mass claims, especially in places like Germany. However, the Court of Justice of the European Union, the CJEU, recently clarified something important. They said just infringing a data protection rule isn't automatically enough to count as damage that deserves compensation.
Okay, so what is needed?
There has to be actual, tangible harm and a clear causal link between the breach and the harm. So a purely hypothetical risk of misuse, that's not enough to justify compensation anymore. This is actually a critical strategic insight for anyone involved in privacy litigation. It sets a much higher bar for getting compensation. It shifts the burden of proof firmly onto the individual, making it harder to win cases based just on potential risks.
Then cybersecurity. Feels like it's woven into absolutely everything these days. What's the latest on that front?
Yeah, this is where things get, well, frankly, a bit surprising, maybe even alarming, because while law enforcement has had some wins against cybercriminals like Operation Kronos disrupting the Lockbit ransomware group,
I remember that.
the whole ransomware as a service model, it just keeps fueling this relentless rise in incidents. And what's even more concerning is that AI-driven tools, including really convincing deepfakes, are making cyber attacks much harder to deal with. We've seen that in recent social engineering scams. The attackers are getting way more sophisticated.
So what's being done in response?
Well, a whole suite of new regulatory initiatives is coming online. Things like the EU's Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA, and the UK's upcoming Cybersecurity and Resilience Bill. These frameworks, they mandate robust defense measures, yes, but they also impose really heavy compliance demands and severe penalties if you don't comply. So organizations aren't just being encouraged to be diligent anymore, they're being legally forced to prioritize really rigorous risk management.
Okay, our final deep dive for today takes us into the pretty complex world of global governance, justice, and corporate accountability. Legal battles here seem to be increasingly shaping future norms.
Yeah, what's really fascinating is just the sheer volume and the growing complexity of litigation, especially around climate change and corporate responsibility. It really reflects this growing global demand for transparency and accountability from governments and corporations.
Let's start with climate change litigation then. Is that field still growing, or are we seeing it level off?
Well, the overall rate of growth slowed down just a little bit in 2024, but there were still at least 226 new climate cases filed. That brings the global total now to nearly 3,000 cases spread across almost 60 countries.
Wow, 3,000.
Yeah. And over 80% of those were classified as strategic, meaning they're trying to set precedents or influence policy, not just win that specific case. And a really significant trend is the dynamic growth in the global south. Nearly 60% of the cases recorded since 2020 have actually been filed there.
Interesting. Who's bringing those cases?
Well, often it's governments, regulatory agencies, public prosecutors. They're playing a key role, initiating 56% of the cases in 2024. And they're often seeking compensation for very specific, localized climate damages, things like damage from deforestation in Brazil, for example. So it shows a shift in who's suing and what they're suing for. What's also notable is that the target of corporate litigation is broadening. About 20% of the 2024 cases targeted companies or their directors or officers, and this now includes new kinds of cases.
Like what?
Like cases against professional services firms for what they call facilitated emissions, essentially, helping high-emission projects happen, and even cases against the agricultural sector for alleged climate disinformation. So the net is definitely widening.
Are there any particular landmark cases that really stand out, ones that set important precedents for what might come next?
Absolutely. The Dutch Court of Appeal, in that Millie Defensie versus Shell case, they affirmed that companies do have a duty to contribute to fighting climate change by reducing their emissions. And importantly, that includes Scope 3 emissions, the downstream emissions from using their fossil fuel products.
So not just their own direct pollution.
Exactly. It means courts might start demanding much more rigorous scrutiny for high-emission projects through things like environmental impact assessments, holding companies accountable for their entire value chain, not just their direct actions. Then in New Zealand, there's the Smith versus Fonterra case. That alleges 7 corporations caused greenhouse gas emissions that damaged culturally significant sites for Maori. That case is now actually proceeding to trial, which is a big step because it directly links corporate emissions to cultural harm. And in Germany, a ruling against a candy company, Katjes, clarified something about advertising. If you label a product climate neutral, you have to clearly state whether emissions were actually prevented or just offset. Otherwise, it's considered misleading. So definitely a win for transparency in marketing claims.
It really does sound like we're just at the beginning of a whole new wave of environmental justice litigation.
I think we are. And, to put this in perspective, there's a new wave of biodiversity litigation starting to emerge now, too. It seems to be following a similar path to the climate change cases. For instance, Friends of the Earth Germany filed a constitutional complaint against the German government for failing to adopt a coherent plan for biodiversity protection. They're arguing it infringes fundamental human rights. So it's a clear signal the legal focus is expanding beyond just climate to the broader ecological impact.
Okay, so moving beyond just environmental issues, what's happening with broader corporate accountability and class actions in general?
Well, 2025 is shaping up to be a monumental year for class actions, especially across Europe. We're seeing really novel theories of harm being put forward, bringing claims about privacy, technology, environmental issues into the scope of tribunals, like the UK's Competition Appeal Tribunal.
So new kinds of cases are being allowed.
Essentially, yeah. New avenues for people to seek redress are opening up. For example, right now there are 17 active class actions against tech companies just in the UK. Together, they're valued at roughly $30 billion.
$30 billion.
Yeah, huge cases against Google, Meta, Apple, and there's even a first-of-its-kind UK class action being threatened against Microsoft and Google over how they allegedly unlawfully collected and used personal data to train their AI models. The stakes here are just incredibly high.
Yeah.
Another really key development is the EU's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, the CSDDD. That came into force in July 2024.
What does that do?
It introduces a civil liability framework. Basically, it means companies can now be held liable for damages if they fail to prevent or end adverse human rights and environmental impacts both within their own operations and their supply chains.
Okay, that sounds significant.
It is. It significantly increases the potential for civil lawsuits and puts way more pressure on companies to really ensure ethical practices throughout their entire business.
That raises an interesting question then. How are disputes evolving around things like broken deals or conflicts after mergers and acquisitions in this kind of complex environment?
Well, the aftermath of, economic downturns and geopolitical instability like the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, that definitely led to an increase in those kinds of disputes in 2024. And what we're seeing is companies increasingly turning to arbitration to resolve these cross-border financial and M&A disputes. They value its enforceability and also the confidentiality it offers.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And England in particular is even reforming its Arbitration Act right now. They want to encourage the summary dismissal of claims that clearly lack merit, basically making London even more attractive as a place to arbitrate these really high-stakes disputes.
Okay, finally, let's touch on whistleblowing. What changes are we seeing in terms of protecting people who speak up? And what about incentives?
Whistleblowing is still a really hot topic, both in the UK and across Europe. There are growing calls for legal reform. The EU Whistleblowing Directive, which all member states have now implemented, it offers enhanced protections. It covers a broader range of people than the UK's current law, the Public Interest Disclosure Act.
So better protection than the EU?
Generally, yes. It's really about empowering more people to come forward without fear of reprisal. There's also ongoing talk in the UK about setting up an independent office of the whistleblower.
Like they have elsewhere.
Exactly. Similar to Spain's new authority, which actually has the power to enforce whistleblower laws with fines. Now, the UK does currently offer some financial rewards for whistleblowers, but they're pretty modest compared to the really substantial rewards you see from US authorities.
Like the SEC.
Right, like the Securities and Exchange Commission. They've awarded over $2.2 billion to whistleblowers since 2011. So this could be a really significant area for development in the UK. The new government there has even hinted at offering significant financial rewards for whistleblowers,
Wow.
which could potentially align the UK model more closely with the US one, hoping to encourage more disclosures.
So yeah, as you can definitely tell from this deep dive, 2025 is clearly a year marked by some really substantial shifts.
Yeah.
Across healthcare, tech, global legal frameworks, pretty much everywhere.
It really does highlight the critical need for everyone, individuals, organizations to stay informed, be adaptable and actively engage with these changes. Ignoring them just isn't really an option anymore.
Absolutely. From those nuanced impacts of the big, beautiful bill on your healthcare, maybe your retirement plans, right through to the groundbreaking legal challenges and regulatory responses in the world of AI, and that increasing demand for corporate accountability globally. These developments just underscore how interconnected everything has become. Now, here's a thought that keeps rattling around for me. If these trends continue, what new responsibilities might individuals and companies actually face in navigating this increasingly complex future? And maybe more importantly, what new opportunities might emerge for those who are prepared, those who understand and can adapt to these shifts?
Yeah, and that naturally leads us to wonder, as the sheer volume of information just keeps exploding, how can each of us, how can you become more discerning consumers of news? How can we become better advocates for our own interests in this rapidly changing world? How do we cut through the noise ourselves?
Definitely something to think about as you continue making your way through 2025. It's all the time we have for this deep dive. We really hope you feel a little more well-informed. Till next time, keep digging deeper,